want to talk about a particular phenomena of amplification that's often involved in the migration of trauma into the more chronic state of PTSD. And to begin with, just to refresh, trauma is a reaction, a physiological reaction to the presentation of a pattern of energy that does or appears to threaten survival on any dimension, financial, social, mental, emotional. And it's on any dimension because in most of our realities, one migrates to the other. In most of our realities, we cannot lose all of our money and be penniless without it also severely compromising our social dimension. In many cases, if a wealthy person becomes penniless, many of their, quote, friends will disappear and a variety of partitions will go up because in our cult, money is viewed as more valuable than human beings. And so it's not actually the human being that is the magnet, it is the money, and so that falls away when the money falls away. So if rippling, if losing money causes one to lose one's sense of love and belonging, if losing one's sense of love and belonging severely jeopardizes self-esteem, if these inevitably lead to health crises as well as more financial crisis, because we have this interesting cultural dynamic where when you don't need money, for example, and you don't need help, people are very generous. As soon as you're in a place of need and desperation, the response is the opposite. And it's a very bizarre and sociopathic pattern, but it nonetheless is our culture in its current state. If you're in love and radiant and feel highly sexed and amazing, all kinds of potential lovers and mates migrate towards you and are attracted to you and offer their services. If you're in a panic, desperate, lonely place, nobody comes and offers this connection. Similarly, banks will loan tons of money to people who don't need a loan, and they won't loan any money to people who are desperate for a loan. People like to be friends with people who have plenty of friends, and generally avoid those who do not have friends. So when we're in a cult of a sociopathic nature, i.e. where we do the exact opposite of what is needed, then any shift in these dimensions becomes perilous because there's not a lot of fear in a cult that says, as soon as you need, we will respond and care about your need. Need is not a trauma in such a cult. But a cult that says, if you dare need anything, we will punish you by not only not giving you what you need, but by withdrawing more of what you had and labeling and stigmatizing you. For example, if you need a home, not only will we not give you a home, we will now label you as homeless. And of course, we wouldn't give a job to a homeless person. We will define you by your smallest characteristics, or what we consider to be the defining characteristic. You may be a musician, you may be a fabulous lover, you may have one of the biggest hearts on the planet, but if you don't have a home, you are now homeless. And that becomes the defining thing, which is of course not what someone who's going through the trauma of being without a home needs, is to be stigmatized by their lowest common denominator in a judgmental cult that considers homeless people to be inferior. So in any dimension, physical, your physical survival is threatened. Well, so is your financial. Your medical bills go up exponentially, and you can't work because you're in jeopardy. And it can be the other way around. Your emotional well-being is traumatized. Now suddenly you can't make the sale, and so now your financial well-being goes down. And so in this domino effect, where one crisis typically ripples out into another, in a sociopathic environment where the more you need, the less you get, it becomes terrifying to have a breakdown in one of these dimensions. And one of the best medicines or prescriptions in our cult is simply to hide it. If you're terrified and lonely, say you're doing fine, so that other people won't attack you for being terrified and lonely. If you are poor, pretend to have plenty of money. Now, I don't need anything, because then people won't shame you and gossip about you for being needy. If you're desperate for a date, pretend that you've got so many dates you can barely fit one in, and that kind of basically put on a front, put on a performance to accommodate the sociopathic nature of the cult. Because if it was an empathic cult, you wouldn't put on a performance at all. If you were needy, you'd say, I really need something. If you're lonely, you'd say, I'm very lonely. With whom, who else would enjoy some company, and, how can we connect? And there would, of course, be an immediate response. And so this, in this domain, when a pattern of energy presents itself to the individual, it becomes, when a traumatic pattern of energy presents itself to an individual, it has the appearance of, or the actual probability of, jeopardizing the survival in one of these dimensions, which in turn can ripple out to others. And so, it's very much like this process of this energy pattern moving closer and closer and closer until it floods, until there's no more perspective. And in that flooded state, you have no sense of time, you have no sense of context. When will it end? There's no awareness of that. And so there's absolute panic and desperation. Now, this is when, in a healthy and trauma-literate culture, you turn to those around you who still have perspective. Because if the hand is right up against the lens, you can't see anything else other than the hand. But the person who's standing by the side, they can see the lens, they can see the hand, and they can still see the rest of the world. In other words, they've got navigation perspective. Flooded perspective is not navigation perspective, and this is why the advice is, after a major change or trauma, do not make any life decisions for a period of X months. It's not really X months. It's until you're no longer flooded. Because when you are in a flooded state, you will do anything to get out of the flooded state, because it is timeless horror. And, this timelessness is a very important part of it. There's actually an area, and you can lose language and time. There's an area in the brain called Broca's area, and it shuts down in traumatic periods, which you lose all sense of perspective. To get perspective on either time or space, you need to have distinctions. You see, when this pinky is zoomed out here, it's this pinky, and then this finger, and then this finger, and then this finger, and you have time, 1, 2, 3. You have a progression of distinctions. But if this finger zooms in and covers the lens completely, suddenly you don't see anything but it, and you don't even have a label for it, because it's just flooded. Now, in this state, what you need to be hearing around you, and what is required to be seen around you, is people who can still see, that's just one finger totally in your face. Yes, of course, it's so close to you, it's drowning everything else out. But it's still just a finger. And with a little bit of time, as the finger recedes, you will see this finger in context with the million of other events that are about the same size, and this is not going to break you. When it's totally covering your eyes, you don't know because you can't see it in context. And the issue comes particularly in an abuse culture where a lot of trauma is correlated with the way we split it down of the abuser and the victim, is that the surrounding people in abuse culture, in a shame culture, in a fear culture, are often just as afraid of this event as you are. It's because when you're trauma illiterate, one of the things that an observer is worried about when you go into trauma is, will they be sucked into their trauma? Will the mirror neurons of being in your proximity activate in a way that all the unprocessed, unintegrated energy of their past traumas, will that get activated and bring them in? The other is the drowning phenomena, where someone who is in that desperate place of trying to get out of trauma at all costs may bring you in rather than you getting them out of the water, because you're just one person without any training, without any competency, because you're in an emotionally illiterate culture. So you may get into reaction very easily because there's no training, there's no competency in this emotional domain. You can go from cradle to grave in the culture without a single formal hour of emotional training. We talk about chemistry, but we don't break feelings down. I mean, you'll literally learn more about the element table in school, which you will probably never use for the rest of your life. I mean, the typical person today never is asked to mix copper arsenic with, eludia of lime with, iron phosphate at X times. No one's ever asked to do that. But emotions are identical. There are these core components that are biological that produce, through the lens and the instrument, the scientific instrument of the human heart, that instrument that creates this dimension of feeling, which correlates with sensation. So you have sensations that correlate with feelings. You have this mixture of thoughts, beliefs, and sensations and memories, and together they elicit predictable patterns of feeling that are no different than any chemist, except we don't learn to mix. We don't learn the recipes. We don't learn, when you're talking about iron sulfate, for example. Nobody says it's good or it's bad, or don't talk about iron sulfate. Oh, that looks very bad, because we're not insane when it comes to the chemical tables. But in a shame-based, secrecy-based, fear-based, psychologically illiterate culture, you talk about rage or greed or lust or whatever it is. And people say, oh my goodness, that's bad. Don't tell my mother that. Oh my goodness, if she heard you had this feeling, my goodness. Or if so-and-so, oh, you'd lose your job. You'd be in complete trauma. Meaning in a psychologically illiterate cult that is highly attached to certain outcomes but has no science to produce them. I mean, it's fine to be highly attached to love, but then let's have the decency to spend 3 or 4 years in school learning the art of ascertaining the various distinct faces of love, learning what creates the various resonances and states of love externally and internally, measuring them, practicing them, etc. And then you can have some basis in legitimately saying we as a cult want you to be loving and we don't want you to feel hate. But to concoct hate at every turn and maintain a taboo on emotional literacy by refusing to even acknowledge the scientific basis for every feeling is absolutely absurd. And when it is taboo to talk about that absurdity, I mean, you can call your politician, you can call your education system, and they will do anything other than debate the issue because they are insane. And in an insane state, you don't discuss these things rationally. You simply run and hide. And that's what I'm getting at in the surrounding environment of the individual who's going through trauma. Now, the person who's going through trauma understands at some level, I'm not safe, I don't have perspective, and they are afraid that their reactivity, because when you've got a painful object taking up your entire field of vision, you are terrified, so you want to respond. So you're looking out there to others. How much should I be worried about this? And there's two horrible continuums in this dynamic. You're looking out to others. For example, if you have $1 million portfolio and you've lost 10% of it, you've lost 100,000, then people would say, yeah, this is a pretty big deal. It's not going to wipe you out, but you've lost 10%. You can get over it. It's going to take you a few years at X% return on investment to get it back, but the rest of your portfolio is safe, etc. And so this is a useful bit of context. Yes, it's $100,000, but it is 10%. It's not everything. It gives good perspective. That's what you need in a traumatic state. Yes, you are sick. There is a 30% chance you will die, etc. But death is not the end. There are many more horrible things than dying with dignity, and you've got this instead, or it is pretty much a disaster. You have no friends. People hate you. You have a profit-seeking medical thing that's going to make your last few months, a nightmare. You're almost certainly going to die. And yes, this is an absolute disaster. And yes, you can do things to mitigate it, but it's pretty bleak. You need someone to actually understand and grapple with the reality of what is. That's useful because that's a grounded perspective by someone who is not totally in the trauma. And that's what we look for when we say, I was raped, or I was this, or, my partner just left me. What's going on? I feel lost. I feel regressed. And this is another part of the flooding process that certain traumas re-trigger early traumas, which means that we regress to the age at which the original trauma takes place. And what this means is, you have a relationship spatially between two objects. Now, this is a pretty scaled relationship. And so this hand is not going to feel dominated by this hand and vice versa. For the most part, there's an even balance of power and mass, etc. in here. Now, if I get smaller, well, now now this object is bigger by comparison. So when I regress, if I'm 40 and I go back to age 3, well, suddenly the object is 20 times bigger. It's 15, 20 times bigger than it was when I was 40. At 40, I could have dealt with this, but at age 3, I can't. At age 3, it's all unknown, etc. And so, one thing that can turn something into trauma is regression. Just it's flooding me because I'm so small psychologically. And in a psychologically illiterate culture, of course, you have no basis to empathize with yourself or to be empathized with by other people because they have no idea what regression is. They don't track it. They live it. We all live through regressions all the time. If you watch someone, and particularly if you've been lovers with a number of people, and the relationship has a fair amount of range. You will watch your lover become 2 years old and speechless in a moment. You know, they were a sarcastic 50-year-old a few moments ago. Now they're a terrified 2-year-old. What happened? You see, they don't know. They don't say, oh my goodness, I'm in regression right now. Pause. What you did was this, this, and this, and now I'm regressed. And now we need to do this, this, and this, and come back. I'm now 2 years old. This is what we need to get me back to 50 years old, because a 2-year-old can't respond to this situation. That would be a traumatically literate culture with an intelligent person tracking themselves and communicating it to you so that you don't treat a 2-year-old the way you would treat a sarcastic 50-year-old. See, the amount of tolerance, and you know, if you think of waves, for example, they're a very good example of trauma, because waves are one of two things. To a 2-year-old, they drown you, they pull you under, you're dead. They are terrifying, ocean waves. But to a 20-year-old who's been surfing for 3 or 4 years, they are fun. And so it's not that the energy mass, so to speak, is good or bad. You even have this in BDSM dynamics, where someone can find the eroticism of adrenaline very exciting to ask a friend to go through a rape fantasy, for example, because they're not scared. So they're not 2 years old, they're not 5 years old, they're not 10 years old. And so they're 50 years old, they know the safe word. They're perfectly comfortable in that domain. But you take the exact same person and you push, push, push these 3 buttons of of unprocessed energy in their psyche, such that they dial up. That energy dials up. Now it's in their face. Now they regress. Now the very thought of the fantasy is horrifying, is bad, is wrong. It's evil. You know, this is evil. It's wrong. It has to be stopped. How dare you? It's like you were the one who suggested it. What's going on here? I don't know. Get out of here. You're bad. You know, and then you have a 2-year-old suddenly reacting without any responsibility for the old person. And they don't know what happened, and you don't know what happened, because what? I mean, is it surprising that we're dumb when we persist in going through middle school, high school, college, etc., with zero emotional literacy? When we actually add toxicity and warped cult memes on top of our literacy, determined to shame, humiliate, shock people for speaking the truth, where, you know, because all this truth is inside. To educate someone is to draw the gold, the truth, the goodness within out, to draw the knowledge out, to educate, to bring out that which is within. It's in there. But how does it get out there when as soon as you talk about it, you've got raving idiots shaming you, humiliating you, gossiping about you, projecting their own beliefs and fears, and the entire cult is emotionally illiterate. And so no one knows how to repair this misogyny, this tyranny of ignorance and shame and abuse. How do you repair it? It's very difficult to draw out with that which is within when you can't tell gold from toxicity. So this is, of course, completely predictable within a scientific framework. The more ignorant you are, the more blind you are. The more blind you are, the more you violate that which you don't see. The more you violate that which you don't see, the more pain you create, the more violence erupts. And when you have pain itself being something, when someone says, I'm in pain and I need help, and the response is to look down or avoid them or say, I'm busy, well, this is an emotionally illiterate cult. And that's kind of what we have. We produce pain, and then we kind of avoid it in a certain sense of, I don't want to be here because I feel ashamed that I don't know what I'm doing. Well, why should you feel ashamed? You're in a cult that makes sure that you don't know what you're doing. Very few people transcend their cult. And we have a cult that is committed to emotional ignorance, to a willful pattern of blockades. And these are, of course, based on beliefs. They're based on beliefs that we're bad. So we don't want to see our true nature because, we believe we're bad. You have original sin and all that. So when you have so much bullshit floating around, guiding you to do the exact opposite of what's effective, it is, of course, terrifying and more traumatizing. So observers and people involved very often do one of two things. Out of an underlying belief that the trauma is bigger than them, that the world is a scary place. And when you believe that the world is a scary place, when you believe that pain and trauma is bigger than you, when pain is the master and you are the servant, reacting compulsively to avoid pain, then another person presenting pain and trauma creates a panic, a coping mechanism. And there's two ways this takes place. The one is denial, discounting, minimizing, refusing to see what's right in front of you. The person's bleeding. They've been raped. They're in shock. There, everything will be okay. I don't want to see it. I don't want to deal with it. I get this. And their face is filled with desperation. What should I do? Uncle Henry did this. If Mom finds out, Uncle Henry, my God. And so the person who's witnessing this is overwhelmed and frightened themselves. Now, this communicates to the trauma survivor that no one around them has a clue how to get them out of the trauma. Now, that's the exact opposite of what a trauma survivor needs to hear. And so this is communicated in one of two ways. Either addictive, frantic, insane coping mechanisms by the abuser or witnesses to control and hide the situation, or a refusal to grasp that it's happening at all, or both. It never happened, but I'm going to frantically manipulate everything possible to see that nobody knows that it never happened. Well, why are you manipulating reality to make sure that nobody knows that nothing happened? If nothing happened, why am I signing a non-disclosure document? But because nothing happened, and so you're not going to disclose that nothing happened. Well, why haven't you asked me not to disclose that nothing happened 10 years ago as well, or 5 years ago? Nothing happened yesterday, and nothing happened the day before. Why haven't I signed non-disclosure documents about all those things that never happened? Well, just to be safe, Whose safety? My safety or the abuser's safety? And so you start realizing that you're surrounded by ninnies. You're surrounded by people who are just as afraid of the traumatic event as you are. And they don't know what to do, so they're going to hide it at your expense, so that no one has to respond. And this is a very concerning thing, particularly when these are the grown-ups, the therapists, the adults, the people you thought had it together, the president of the country, and you realize, I thought this was bad, but this must be really bad. Because the president, is doing like when Edward Snowden was in his migration to escape, the totalitarian state of the U.S. intelligence agency, the president of the United States and the vice president, Joe Biden, was calling presidents around the world there will be severe repercussions if you give political asylum to this whistleblower, this person who is revealing illegal activity, unconstitutional activity, activity that is not in the interest of the average person in the country, activity that was lied about, all of this stuff. And the president's main job, that enemy number one, is the person who tells the truth. And this is a fractal pattern. I really want you to get that we're not talking about Snowden and Obama and Joe Biden. We're not talking about Trump. We're talking about the fact that there, in a culture of shame and secrecy, that there are certain truths that are being actively and willfully denied and suppressed within each one of us to accommodate the ignorance of a shame-based cult. That we associate those truths coming to light with the implosion of the power structure, that we will be unloved, that we will be, in jail, that we will be denied if this truth comes to light. And this is a tremendously big deal. When you have that belief based on, endless reinforcements of watching other people get destroyed and stuff because the truth came out, then you do have the dominant ego element, the control conscious mind, frantically trying to do everything to block certain things coming to light. And in the nature of that fractal pattern, why would that change just because they were president or vice president of the United States? Meaning, if you've grown up in a shame cult where you knew that if this photo went public, your life would be destroyed, that if this truth was known, your life would be destroyed, and you knew that you were in a sociopathic cult, which meant that once it was destroyed, this wouldn't be the cue for everyone to come in from the wings and say, you're in a fucked up cult. Of course you did this. That's what 82% of our cult does. Meaning this cult produces human beings in a state of such illiteracy on, trauma and psychology and various things, that 82% of the people do this thing that is not particularly ideal. We agree it's not ideal. We just don't care enough about ourselves and our cult to teach our people how not to do it or what a good alternative is. We just don't care enough about our people. And we're sorry, you're one of the victims. You're carrying this cult's virus. So no one's waiting in the wings to say that. Instead, they're waiting in the wings to gossip, isolate, mitigate, and add and transfer all of their fear in a scapegoat protocol, which is what ignorant cults do. We're a little bit more sophisticated, or we are a little bit crueler, depending, because thousands of years ago when the scapegoat was invented, they were herding goats, so they decided to make one of the goats the villain. And they would stone it out of the village, hurl all the hate and rage of all their fears and shadow elements against a goat. And then they would throw rocks and, hurl hatred at the goat until it was dead and driven out of the village. And this was their great, epiphany. Hooray, we've gotten rid of all of our hate. No, you haven't. But there's a delusion of transference. There's a ritual of transference. Oh my goodness, thank goodness we are now a civilized culture because we stoned a goat to death. Aren't we spiritual and wonderful? Well, we would never do that to a goat today. How dumb. We do it to human beings. Now, nice for goats, not so good if you're the scapegoat as a human being. Because, at least rational people knew it was a ritual. If it's a goat, you can't logically, honestly believe that if there's lust and thievery and molestation and horrible evil things in your village that have to be gotten rid of, that throwing rocks at a goat is really going to do it. It's a cathartic ritual that kills a goat, an innocent goat. Well, we now do cathartic rituals that kill human beings, drive them to suicide, drive them to addiction, drive them into shame and fragmented lives by transferring our cult's ignorance and stupidity onto human beings. But of course, we would never hurt a goat. Let's be clear about our current state of evolution. And so this dynamic of scapegoating creates enormous fear, because the question in the scapegoating thing is, it's a musical chairs game. When you have ignorance and fear, when you have shame, and you produce large amounts of abuse and violation in your cult, then the question is, when the music stops playing, who is going to be the new scapegoat? Because it's pivoted and directed at some minority faction, and it's usually not the president. We get to see this with Trump doing a terrific job of educating us on who takes the hit. Trump is arguably the most corrupt, the most self-absorbed, the most disregarding of law and protocol and ethics of anyone in his team. But people fall around him. His son gets dragged in for here. His political advisor gets put in jail for this. His campaign advisors, because in a sociopathic cult, it's not about where's the fault. It's about who has the power to hurt other people. It's who's the figurehead in a dominance hierarchy. And so the cult protects itself. It doesn't protect people. The cult has no interest in whether your life is ruined or not in order to maintain the image of the cult. My colleague Fred Burks, presidential interpreter for 2 U.S. presidents, when he revealed that 2 U.S. presidents were lying about Indonesia and came forward with what he actually translated, that was being lied about by 2, Republican and Democratic presidents. Was he appreciated for letting the world know what's actually going on? Were the presidents held accountable for bald-faced, corrupt lies? No. What happened was he got fired. His truth was denied, of course. And the presidential interpreter contract now makes it a felony. What they basically did was scared the shit out of any future interpreter and said that you can't even tell your wife where you are, you can't tell your wife what was said. They basically isolated you. They've created a mental emotional disease where you can't integrate your experiences. And of course, if you're an American interpreter and you learn that your government and your president is lying and bullying, and you know anything about psychology, you understand that if they're lying and bullying a supposedly friendly nation over here, they're also lying and bullying to you, the people. Sociopathic people are not friendly to you and then horrible to this other person. The sociopathic people, it's a state. If you are willing to lie, you are willing to lie. If you are willing to abuse, you are willing to abuse. And so an intelligent person would say, my goodness, my government is a threat to the human beings in my country. My government would rather hide its secrets than do what's good for the country. My government could be the greatest threat to national well-being in the country. We don't fully know because it is a government of lies and secrecy. If you're an interpreter and you watch one lie after another going in this context, and you understand psychology, you understand that one lie after another is happening when you're not interpreting, when you're in those closed-door meetings. And you have to wonder, who are you in service to? If you're lying and hurting, even our allies, Indonesia is not, a particularly big enemy or anything. It's a wonderful country in many ways, which is why we like going to Bali. It's not the enemy. But if we treat it that way, what are we saying? And this is the crisis. When an abuse survivor tells the truth and the people around them are more frightened and more scared of the discomfort that it will bring in their interactions with an abusive power structure. What's learned here? How do you respond? And what needs to be understood is that as a traumatic event happens, of course there's all kinds of physiological changes, etc., but the trauma survivor feels helpless and overwhelmed, etc., and reaches out around for help. Says, this is what's going on, please help me. And what they don't need is people whitewashing it and refusing to see or feel what's going on, which gives the message, this is too big for me, I won't deal with it, you're in a sociopathic cult. What they don't need is people saying that our agendas around power and politics, etc., are so much more important than your life, than your state of being, that we're going to actually turn you into the enemy and control and lie to you, etc. That's what we're going to do. Because this is terrifying to us, there is no reassurance there. When someone acknowledges the issue, feels the pain, acknowledges the pain, and does the right thing, I will stand by you. I will stand by you in this. I will do what's necessary to respond. I get that this is a big deal. I will be here with you, and it is this big of a deal. It's not bigger, it's not smaller, it is this big of a deal. And it is a big deal, or you wouldn't be traumatized. And I want to understand why, and I want to know what I can do to help. This is an empathic cult. And in an empathic cult, people who are in trauma do not develop PTSD. In a sociopathic cult, people who develop trauma reach out, are met with the fear and the terror and the weight and the hate and the anxiety and the sociopathic disconnection of other people. And this adds to the burden that they're carrying. Their body then needs to process the fact that 10 people are all afraid of them. 10 people don't know what they're doing. 10 people are more concerned with their own small issues than they are with your big issues. You are in a sociopathic cult. This is the point where trauma becomes PTSD. And I want to give I want to look at the code here and then, get into a couple of examples. So behavior equals beliefs. Beliefs equal impact. If someone says, oh my God, don't let anyone know this, that's a behavior. The behavior equals a belief, meaning there are a series of beliefs under that pleading. And those beliefs range from people want to hurt you, people want to suppress the truth, we're in an insane world, it's the unknown, and the unknown is dangerous. I've never done this before, and I never want to do something I've never done before, because the unknown is terrifying. The world is a scary place. All of these beliefs, could be any number of mix of them, go into something like a suppression of truth. Because when you're intelligent in an empathic cult, you don't suppress truth. You welcome it. As a scientist, what you look for is true and accurate data from as many sources as possible, as quickly as possible, and you synthesize that data to create more well-being. You say, an air traffic controller. When there's a ping on the screen that says flying in at 700 feet from 32 degrees west, the air traffic controller doesn't say, don't tell me, I'll get in trouble. They do if they deal with a dysfunctional boss in an absurd and corrupt authority, sure. But an intelligent scientific air traffic controller, and we don't have too much corruption in air traffic control, so they tend to be intelligent. They say, thank you for your position. And they gather all the other positions. And they have confidence that with this data, they will have a smooth landing of all the different planes and flights, all flying at 500 miles an hour, all hundreds of tons of weight, all capable of crashing into one another. But if they have the accurate data, they're going to land them all successfully. And so they welcome it. That's an empathic thing. You tell the air traffic controller your position because you expect them to help you. When you believe that you will be hurt, you do the opposite. You try and create secrecy. Now, it is the belief that creates the impact. If you believe or understand that the people around you believe, and so you think maybe I should believe it too, because all things are viral in nature around human beings. If you've got 100 people around human beings that all say the world is a terrifying, lonely place, and you say, well, maybe it's a happy place, and they all get very upset and start shouting at you because you're failing to toe the line, then you say, okay, fine, the world is a scary and unhappy place. And they're like, yeah, good, now we can move on to how we're going to respond to this scary world. You pick up the weight of other people's beliefs, because beliefs are, in some ways, an intrusion of order onto chaos. You form a belief because you're looking for certainty. Why not just be present in the world with its pains, with its griefs, with its this? Why not be present in the innocence of the fool, in the archetypes? Why not be present with the world? Because it's volatile, because it's chaotic, because I was hit into trauma when I was 1 year old and 2 years old, and I vowed I'd never be in that sea of chaos, that sea of the unknown again. And so all parents are bad, all boys are horrible, oh my goodness, now I know how things are. I can escape the chaos by clinging to the fixation, the certainty of my beliefs. So, why have beliefs in any ways? The very act of creating and hanging to dogmatic beliefs is in many ways a statement that my experience of the world is of a terrifying place that needs to be controlled and managed, or I will die. So the more dogmatic and fixed and stuff is, the more we've had that kind of trauma, and my beliefs help me escape that panic. Well, you believe something different. Don't. How dare you? Can't you see it my way? I've got to cling to my beliefs to escape the chaos and the wonder of the unknown in its beauty and its shadow. I've got to do that. And you're saying my belief could be wrong? You're saying I should be back out in that sea of terror and fear? Forget that, you fucking asshole. Let me kill you because I'm right. And I'm clinging for dear life to certainty in a world in which chaos terrifies me. Because my first initiation into this cult, into this time frame, into this world, was of uneducated, emotionally and psychologically illiterate parents, giants, who did not know how to attune themselves to me, who had all kinds of schizophrenia and insanity going on in their family system, where one day I was a good girl for doing my homework, the next day I'm a loser for doing the same homework, the next day I'm a slut, the next day I'm... these people are insane. It's chaotic. It's terrifyingly schizophrenic. And I don't know how to prepare for giants who are this crazy. And so I need something certain to hold on to. And so, parents are evil, people are evil, I'm evil. Okay, fine. Now we know what's going to happen. I'm going to be punished because I'm bad, because I'm evil and I'm bad, and I'm going to be punished because that's what happens to bad. Oh, thank goodness, I know what's going on. I don't have to be in this, 30-foot swells with giants, hurling their insanities all over about me with the self-centeredness of a child, so they can't possibly understand what I'm feeling like as an infant, because they're absorbed in their own reactive, childlike nature. Because we have a cult of children in giant bodies relative to an infant. It's that dynamic of bigness and smallness. I'm small, so you're giant. In that clinging to beliefs, the question is, which beliefs will we cling to? We cling to beliefs in part to escape the chaos, the unknown, etc., because the conscious mind can't process that chaos. And so we look for heuristic models of reality. They're not real, but they work. If you have 5 points on a circle, it's not the infinite distinctions on a circle. It's 5 points on a circle. But with the 5 points, you can, just like with a cell phone tower, you can triangulate. If you've got 3 points, you can triangulate all the other points from the 3 points. So you need at least 3 points to have, a working model of reality. But it's not reality. It's a working model of reality. It's a belief. It's not real. It's a model of what's way. It's a way to interact with energy. And these beliefs create impact. If you believe you are bad, and you believe that bad people should be punished, that spits out a conclusion. You will be punished. If you understand that punishment involves inflicting pain in a cult where that's what we do with, you created pain, so we'll create some more pain. Then you've got pain leading to pain, and there's pain in the past, so the leading. So now you are afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of pain. You are now afraid of the future, because the future involves my punishment, because we all know I'm bad, because that was better than saying I'm around crazy people who just hurt people for no reason. I'm not bad, I'm just being hurt. Who knows? Maybe I'll be killed tomorrow. It doesn't matter if I'm good or bad. I have no control over these giants. They're buffoons. So how do we respond to that? We respond to it by seeking certainty, so at least we have something to cling to. And the easiest certainty to cling to is something negative and painful. It will all end badly. It's very hard to argue with that, because you say, well, I just met a lovely girlfriend and fell in love. It doesn't matter. It will all end badly. Mark my words. Oh, it hasn't ended badly yet? Well, you just wait. 2 years go by, 3 years go by, 5 years go by, 10 years, they cheated on your best friend. See, it all ended badly. They died. I told you it ended badly, And death is bad, by the way, so even if everything went wonderful for your entire life, it will end badly with your death. Well, this is a lovely, certainty to hang on to, and so you don't go up and down with the swell. When the swell lifts you up with joy and exultation and excitement, you cling to, I'm not going up there because it's all going to end badly. And so I'll just wait down here, miserably and angrily fuming about the fact that it will all end badly. And other people can have joys and then disappointments and go up and down with the chaos and the patterns of energy in life, but not me. I have control. It's very easy to lock down in misery and agony and stuff, because you can do it to yourself. If no one else is doing it, you just remind yourself what a shit you are. You can eat terrible food that makes you feel bloated. You can You can fall down and hurt yourself. You can do any number of things to tell and remind yourself that it's all going to end badly and life's a bitch and all that. Now, on the other hand, if you say life is incredibly joyful and beautiful and wonderful, then someone can say, no, it isn't. Look at that ugly skyscraper. Look at that billboard. You're wrong. But life is bad and it's a shit. You're wrong. I'm not going to believe you. I'm not going to believe you. It's a very closed-in, defended place in essence. And so it's harder to get someone in that belief and in that private hell to come out and smell the roses. They can stay in there as long as they want. And so children move from the joy and innocence and expansion of the world in an abuse culture quickly into, the cynicism and hate of teenagers, who are absolutely, they understand it's all unfair. Everything's unfair. It's all wrong. It's all going to end badly. I'm never going to be loved, blah, 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 blah. They're just escaping the volatility and the complexity of a chaotic life in which we are psychologically illiterate. So beliefs create impact. If you believe that the future is filled with pain, you feel trauma, particularly if it's a big pain. Like, oh my gosh, that could kill you. That guy could shoot you. And when he learns that you said this about him and made him feel stupid, oh, he could kill you, whatever it is, because you deserve to, you're going to be punished and this. So beliefs create impact. Beliefs about what? Beliefs about the future. Beliefs about what's happening now. You are being punished right now. God wants you to suffer. Well, if you believe that the totality of all that is wants you to suffer and will punish you if you don't suffer voluntarily, God wants you to suffer. Well, I'm not doing it. Well, then you'll really suffer because he will smote you. He will burn you in a lake of fire. If you don't suffer voluntarily, oh my goodness, your future is worse than the rest of ours. I mean, we're suffering voluntarily in hope for a reduced sentence in the belief structure that the ultimate deity is a fucked up son of a bitch who attacks his own children. Doesn't that sound like mom and dad? Isn't that just a projection of the giant that the infant feels onto the giant of a projected deity? Of course. Highly abused cults project highly abusive deities, giants out there to remind them and stay consistent with their childhood experiences in a cult, again, that doesn't educate its people. So beliefs equal impact. How do you get out of trauma, overwhelming pain and terror in which you do anything possible to get out of it, when you believe that tomorrow you will be punished because you're a bad person, and you believe that everyone around you knows it and will stand by and let you be beaten because they can't possibly fight because this is the way of the world. It's not us doing it. We don't want you to suffer. This is the way of the world. We can't stop it. So you're going to be alone and lonely forever in this horrible trauma. The trauma survivor, the person in trauma, looks out and sees this in the darting expressions of the people around them. Oh my gosh, I can't get sucked into this. I've got to go. You see them panicking, trying to figure out how they're going to escape you. And if you realize that they're scared of you and you feel completely helpless and regressed, you're in deep shit. Or someone knows absolutely nothing. They come in confidently, come on, we're going to get you going. You realize they're so dumb they don't even know they're dumb. They haven't a clue. They can't even let themselves see their ignorance because that would be too threatening for them. And you realize these are the people I'm going to be depending on to get out of hell. I'm in hell, overwhelming pain, and I'm surrounded by people who are so insecure that they cannot acknowledge their own ignorance. How am I going to get out of that with these people? I'm in a better state than they are because I actually know that they don't know what they're doing. They don't. So I don't know what to do, but I know more than these guys who I'm relying on for help. Explosion into PTSD. Suppression, denial, and secrecy equals fear. You do not spend energy to suppress, deny, and keep a secret. Don't tell anyone here, I'll sign this contract, I'll give you $100,000, don't tell anyone this. give you another 100,000. You don't tell anyone this. I'm going to shoot you if you tell this. I'm going to kill your dog. You don't spend that kind of frantic energy without fear. All suppression, all secrecy, all denial. No, it never happened. No, that's not true. You don't have a right to have that feeling. All denial is fear. All fear is based on belief. Belief that the event is bigger than them, or belief that they will be punished for being who they are. So they've got to keep some part of who they are secret because that part of them is bad, and it's bad, and it's bad. That part of them is bad, and it's a part of them, and they have got to keep it secret. So don't let anyone do that. And so, of course, you feed something with fear, so it tends to erupt. When you're hiding something, it tends to come out. It's very interesting in judicial scandals. It is usually the cover-up that gets the person in the most trouble. No, this never happened. No, that never happened. You've got to lie. You've got to sign a non-disclosure. And then it's all of that conspiracy to hide and obstruct the truth that generally gets people into trouble and ousted and all that. It's not usually the original issue. But when you believe that the original behavior is unforgivable, unlovable, will lead to certain trauma and pain, then you will do anything that you can to suppress the data. And in suppressing the data, you will frantically commit a series of violations that of a much higher nature to suppress the truth. But it just gets bigger and bigger. The more you control and suppress it, the bigger it gets, basically. And the only person willing to spend more and more energy controlling who they are to hide it and deny it is someone who believes in their fundamental unlovability. The fact that they will be punished for not being good enough is what it boils down to. So the truth cannot get out. Now, when you're surrounded by people who are self-absorbed, 1, and 2, traumatically illiterate, and 3, who are in a denial or a suppression protocol to feel better about themselves because they cannot face their own sociopathic nature or their own helplessness to help or their own ignorance. They just can't deal with it. The person in trauma is asked in a variety of ways to carry the needs of their abusers and their bystanders. I can't deal with this, so would you mind feeling shame for us? Because I don't know what to say, and I don't know what to say about what I'm not going to say. So could you feel bad for us? Just why don't you believe there's something wrong with you? It is so bad that nobody around wants to help. Why don't you believe that? Because then the problem is with you, and we can all feel happy about ourselves, rather than say the problem is with us. What? We kept you and everyone around you psychologically illiterate? My goodness. We took you out of life to teach you about life? My goodness. We made sure that you know nothing about feelings. We humiliated you for having feelings. We told you that boys don't have feelings. Men don't have feelings. They certainly don't talk about them. Wasn't that enough to shut you up? Oh my goodness, you still talked? Oh. We did this, we did this, we did this. We set you up for this. We told you that money was the most important thing, and your abuser offered you some money to abuse them, and so you should have taken it if you were smart, because we all know money is more important than human beings. Just look at how we play out our lives. And so you did all that. And, of course we fucked up. Of course we don't know what we're doing, and we're sorry, and maybe let's begin learning. No. Why don't you believe that there's something deeply wrong with you, and that this has nothing to do with us? The fact that we can't look you in the eye, the fact that we can't ask you the most basic attunement questions. How can we help? What do you need? What's going on? Help me understand you. Took 2 minutes to ask that? Is that so hard? But what will I do if they tell the truth? What will I do if they ask for this thing that will reveal that something's wrong or that I made a mistake? What will they do then? You see, so that can't be asked. Now, each person around the traumatized individual is getting a mirror neuron transmission of emotional load. The more fearful someone around them is, the more desperate someone around them is, the more panic, the more shame someone around them is feeling, the more angry someone around them is feeling, the higher the load. It's like I'm in trauma and people start putting boxes and boxes and boxes into the person's hand till they can barely move because there's all these boxes. You know, you're at fault because you're talking too much. You're at fault because I'm busy and you should know that I'm busy and you shouldn't have a traumatic event while I'm busy. Wouldn't that be nice if we could schedule our traumatic events for when people weren't busy? You making me feel uncomfortable. You're too intense. Don't you understand that's not cool? Well, who said cool is anything noble? It's just high on the sociopathic spectrum. It doesn't matter. Everyone knows that cool is good in this cult, and so get on board. We do this, endless dynamic of telling the person in trauma, you're a problem because I don't know how to deal with you. The fact that I don't know how to deal with you is not a problem. And because I feel guilty about that, we're going to add some veneer on top of this. We're not going to just say, go fuck yourself. We're going to add some veneer on this so that it kind of distorts the reality so that you feel a bit crazy. Because when you're feeling overwhelmed and can barely see anything, it really helps to have your vision distorted for the little bit that you can see by having people fuck around, say this is love and then slap you in the face. That'll throw them off, right? And so we do these different dynamics where we say, I mean well for you. I'm doing my best. You know this, don't you? And then I'm going to do the exact opposite of what you need right now when there's nothing physically stopping you from actually listening. Isn't that your best, to listen, to actually stop interrupting me? Well, I've got to go, and that's my best. See you. And so could you appreciate me for doing my best and stuff? It's like I just got punched in the face and asked, I'm asked to relabel my vocabulary to call a punch in the face support. And how dare you? And then once they've convinced themselves that their support is love, that it's not abuse, then they get angry. Why aren't you receiving my support well enough? You did this and this and this. And so and this person just realizes that the more they interact with people, they desperately need help, but the more they interact with people, the more they are asked to carry the emotional load of the people around them. And because you're terrified of isolation, when you need help, you're trying to hold people around you. Because in an empathic culture, people would circle around you naturally. So-and-so has trauma, let's circle around, see what they need. When people are fear-based and psychologically illiterate, they run away. So you're trying to hold them. And they're like, well, if you're going to hold me, you better carry my shame around this. You better pretend that this is love. You better, because you're holding me in there. And, this is what I have to give. And I'm not willing to be held in here and feel shitty about myself. So you just get busy rewriting your vocabulary about what it is that I'm doing. I told you all this for your own good. I didn't ask you to how I could help you because you need to be strong. I ignored what you said here because I didn't want to make you feel bad. So I just said, no, it isn't. It's fine. Everything's fine. I said it would be okay because that makes me feel good, even though the fact it's not okay. You're bleeding to death, and I'm walking away saying it's okay rather than calling an ambulance. Makes me feel good, though, because I'm not going to call an ambulance because that would mean competency in knowing what I'm doing. but I don't want to feel like I'm just killing you by walking away. So I'll just say, there, it'll be okay. And we'll walk away and then say, well, it was okay. What did they do? They died? When I told them it would be okay, they had the nerve to die? What? Oh, my goodness. I told them it would be okay. Why did they have to die? This endless, and the crowd, in an emotionally illiterate, shame-based cult, the crowd colludes. So now you have the crowd ganging up on the one for having the audacity to get sick, the audacity to acknowledge some of the truth of the abuse culture, the nerve of it. We all stay silent about our abuses. Don't you know what proper etiquette is in this cult? We're a cult of secrecy and lies. Who told you you could tell the truth? And no, we don't tell the truth about that. You think we're going to admit to being a cult of secrecy and lies? We're not going to tell the truth about that either. Shut up about that as well. That is the final clause. You have to keep everything under wraps and blah, 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 and then you have to pretend that the whole contract doesn't exist. Now, we can all live in poppycock land where everything is love and light and it's all wonderful and there's a grand purpose for your traumatic event. God works in mysterious ways. Give a donation to the church. Clearly your trauma. God's been very busy working in mysterious ways, so you better pay him a donation. And so belief that the event is bigger than them equals PTSD for the trauma survivor. When the trauma survivor looks out and says, I'm scared, I don't know what's going on, and first of all, it's shut down. That's usually the first defense. That was the first thing that I heard. No, nothing's happening, nothing's happening, nothing's happening. Then I reached out to more people and I said, well, something's happening, but it's your fault. We're not going to help you. Then I, started reaching out and saying, no, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. I started dealing with their fear and their anger. Like, why do you have to say this? Why do you have to see it that way? Why do you have to feel this way? And then finally, it's like, well, everything's fine now. Look at all the support we've been giving you, and we love you. We wish you well. Just take all this abuse, turn it into a vision, of a loving win-win environment, and then we'll all feel great about ourselves. And the fact that you can't quite cope and deal with this emotionally, physiologically, the fact that this has happened, well, it was all for the best. It was all for the best. See you later. Oh, and then we're not going to deal with him again because, my goodness, he made us look like fools, the bastard. Get away from him because he's revealing the cult dynamic, the contract, the abuse contract that we sign as children with our original abusers because they don't want to feel bad that they're horrible parents, and so They abuse us, they punish us and blame us for the symptoms of the abuse. Then they call the abuse love, and then they demand that we thank them for all of their love and say that the abuse never happened. Sign here. Okay, you are now a proud member of this family. You too can be abused, and know nothing about it because the contract is very clear that this contract does not exist, and that the secrets cannot be talked about, that there are no secrets, but they can't be talked about. And so, no, you're drifting into inappropriate terrain. Do we have to talk about that at dinner? Do we have to deal with this again? Do we have to do this? Oh my goodness, it's all about me. It's all about me. I, the poor suffering giant, have got to listen to my children's ingratitude. Maybe if we had a cult that taught parents how to love and what love meant. What is love? What is love exactly? Do we have a working definition? I love you. What does that mean? Does that mean you are going to, bail me out of jail or not? Does that mean you're going to learn who I am or not? Or what does that mean exactly? Well, you're one of the difficult ones, so maybe we don't love you after all. So this... the key thing that I wanted to highlight in all of this is what I call the emotional load, and it is an equation. Trauma triggers the desperate need for love and belonging to reassure the safety and security of survival. You reach out to others, and you have to say something happened. Now, I fell down the stairs. Could you help me? You know, it's not terribly useful. We all know it protects the abuser and stuff, but you know, I'm afraid of the stairs. Please help me. And so we have to reach out in some way for help. And then the question is, what are we met with? Are we met with, oh my gosh, I wonder if the business deal that I'm doing with your abuser is up, you know, is going to cause me a problem. You know, so I've got a police record. I don't want to join you down at the police station to talk about this. Why don't you go on your own? I've got a busy date, you know. And then don't make this, you know, don't call my sociopathic behavior sociopathic. Let's not acknowledge the fact that trauma is the single biggest and most severe emotional event in our lives, because trauma is the only experience in which we're completely flooded. Now, one might argue, of course, because everything has positive and negative potential, that profound transcendent experiences, which are not very common in a sociopathic cult, but imagining, I mean, we have the potential to be flooded with profound ecstasy. It's just that's not going on that much in our cult. So the only experience that we, in general terms, are flooded are when a painful event that we can't stop. If we could, we'd stop it, right? But we can't. That's why it gets so close. That's why we get flooded. Floods us to a point that we lose context, lose time, are overwhelmed, are in coping mechanisms that are likely to cause even more harm to our lives, and we desperately need help. And for anyone to be so dumb as to brush that aside and expect the relationship to survive, to deny that it's happening, to say that going on a movie date, to pretend that, I'm worried about the $10,000 contract with your abuser, any of that, or I might have to pay a few $100s and, you know, and help or something. That is absurd to an emotionally literate and empathic culture. It's normal in a sociopathic culture, but the last thing you need to hear when you're in enormous pain is that you are in a sociopathic culture, by the facial expressions, the inactions, and the actions of other people. The message that nothing's wrong is a message of insanity. The message that, you know, it's no big deal, nothing wrong, whatever. Oh, interesting, bye, is a message of insanity. You realize that the other person is either completely sociopathic and cruel or doesn't have a clue. Either one is disturbing if you need help. The message that our needs are more important than yours and we've got to get this managed in a certain way and you've got to fit into this and this and this because we have you're threatening our agendas, is another sociopathic message, because both say we're not going to help you. We're not going to help you. But more importantly, both say that the surrounding people are as terrified and incompetent as you are. And that they want you to respond and hold their needs. That they have needs that are more important than your needs. You're in trauma, but they have a need for you to tone it down a bit. They have a need for you to schedule it on Wednesday. Could you be traumatized on Wednesday when I have time for you to be traumatized? They have a need for you to do this and this and the other. And they also have a need for that to be okay and not to be an issue. And then they have a final need to have that be called supportive love and all that. And none of that has anything to do with the impact that it has. So could you just not exist so that we can feel good about ourselves in our insanity, is in a sense what's being delivered. And if you do that, we won't leave you. We will grudgingly, admittedly, put up with all your antics and stuff like that, and we will deal with what was going on Wednesday, mind you, not today. I just, shiver and cower for a few days, and I'll squeeze you into my schedule. All of this, of course, communicates you don't matter. I matter, you don't matter, which, of course, increases the trauma and increases the likelihood of PTSD. The more scared daddy is, that little Jenny at 6 years old is going to tell about the incest. The more little Jenny is asked not only to deal with the message that she doesn't matter enough to be protected, not only to deal with the message that she's not valuable enough for a parent to learn parenting skills prior to having a child, not only is she asked to learn that the needs of a giant to violate a 6-year-old's body is, well, of course, my needs are more important to you. But when she's scared or needs support from someone who's hopefully a little bit healthier, the giant is afraid of her and projects his fear and his panic and his control onto a 6-year-old, 1/5 his size. Often with the message of all kinds of, I'll do anything as necessary, but don't you dare make me look bad. You stay lonely, in shame and invisible so that I can look good. The priest, the pastor, look at, my grandiosity is the will of the Lord, whatever it is, whoever, that's important. You're not. A 6-year-old getting that message, and then, of course, she tries to tell her parents, and her parents are angry. Why are they angry? Oh my gosh, we might look bad in the church. We might look like we're an ungrateful flock, right? Who cares about little Jenny? I mean, give us a fucking break. She's just a brat, but being an ungrateful flock, looking bad, having people gossiping in the sociopathic church oh my goodness, we can't have that. So, shush, the priest is a good man. Don't talk like that. Go to your room. We're going to punish you because we're scared of looking bad. And the priest is going to punish you because he's scared of looking bad. And the church is going to try and, with their little special office of thing, is going to send you a contract that says, this never happened and don't tell anyone, etc., because other people don't matter either. Only the church matters. And you're asked to process all that as the divine will of the Lord or something and go crazy. Because if you tell that in high school, you'll be teased. So now the hostility and anxiety of everyone around you who doesn't know how to deal with this terrain is dumped on the abuse survivor as well. And then, the abuse survivor takes to drink, and we are so grateful that they're willing to abuse themselves and get out of, we can pray for them, hope that they can manage their difficult traumas. We want the best for you, wishing you well. Just get well in our toxic environment. And don't talk about our toxic environment. Talk about how lovely it is that we're praying for you. We'll slap you up this way and that, dump you upside down, throw you in the river, and then we'll pray for you. Now, every time, this is a truth that is absolutely absurd. It's a joke. It's a complete and utter joke. But if the message is that every time we try and tell the truth about this joke, other people get scared or busy, etc., that none of this matters, it's really saying that we have a deep belief in a crazy and inevitably flawed world. Because that's what that is. And if it doesn't matter, it's saying that everyone around us expects it to be a crazy and insane world. So it's not going to change. So my trauma is not going to dissolve. I should just expect it to happen again and again and again. Because we've all decided to believe in a crazy and bizarre world where the best way to cope with it is secrecy, denial, lies, etc., which is guaranteeing that it will continue. Which means there's no hope in sight for the trauma. It will remain PTSD and locked in place indefinitely in the future. This is what the average trauma survivor deals with in our cult when there is abuse from someone in a power position. Doesn't matter if it's the government, a priest, a father. This is what our children and our people deal with. The amount of cruelty the amount of separation from ourselves that is necessary to witness that this is going on and do nothing about the system, and nothing, this is a national crisis, that this is happening to millions of people right now. Millions of people right now are in this prison, just like millions of people are consuming $100,000 of taxpayer money to be locked up in a concrete box right now. As within, so without. Millions of people are in a prison of trauma, shame, and grief that requires deep compassion, deep emotional literacy, patience and attention, and the priority it deserves. One of the good rules to bear in mind in general is that the higher the emotional load on a subject, the more sensitivity and time it deserves and the more priority. You do not divide up attention equally in a group. You pick the highest charged emotions, positive and negative, and you show them respect by acknowledging them as a large mass in the space. And you give honor to a large mass. It's like if you want to drive your little Toyota Prius into a concrete truck moving at 100 miles an hour towards you, go right ahead. You're just going to die. If you want to ignore people's emotional trauma at their deepest levels and pretend nothing's happened, go right ahead, but your relationships will stop to mean anything. And everyone around you will understand instinctively that you're a coward in a fear-based cult, because that's not what an empathic human being does. When enormous energies emotionally are presented, intelligent, confident human beings, empathic human beings, and they're one and the same. You cannot be intelligent without empathy. It is stupid to be sociopathic if you want to live in a world that feels good. If you want to feel good, you've got to live in a world that feels good. To have a world that feels good, you've got to be sensitive to the feelings of other people involved, which means it's an act of stupidity and ignorance to ignore highly charged emotions anywhere in your environment. Meaning in an intelligent cult, all you have to do is say, I'm in an 8, 9, 10 out of pain and trauma, and everyone drops everything to understand the system that's creating the pain, to dissipate the pain, and to let the person know they don't have to go into PTSD as a coping mechanism to avoid, ever-ending pain, that they will actually be supported, and that the next person can do and raise their hand, and they will emphasize why we do that in this cult, because it's healthy. The stupidity and ignorance that we have in our cult is the last thing that a trauma survivor needs going through wave upon wave of abuse in the cult. And so that's the mathematics is really what I wanted to illustrate here. How does that fit together in a way that's real, that correlates with the experience of our 6-year-olds, our 10-year-olds, our 50-year-olds who are repeatedly induced into trauma and then asked to cover it up to protect the abuser.